Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. This time I'm going to go over 5 players that I've been looking to sell high on ahead of week 5. These are guys that you don't necessarily just need to give away here, but they're guys that I think are overperforming or at least overvalued a little bit in relation to what they're going to do the rest of the season. Again, as always, none of these guys are guys you just need to dump for nothing. I'm not saying you need to do that, but I'm saying that these are guys that I think you can get more value out of by trading them than what they're going to give you on your roster the rest of the season. So if you guys have any specific trade questions, let me know in the comments below. I love seeing what sort of stuff you guys are cooking up, seeing if I can help you guys out with that. If you guys have any questions about any of the players or anything, any other comments, again, I love interacting with you guys there. It's a lot of fun, so let me know in the comments below. And other than that, let's just get into it. Got 5 fun players to talk about here. But the quarterback position, again, it's generally hard to talk about a sell high or even any sort of trade target at the quarterback position. It's really hard to really negotiate any sort of quarterback trade just because everybody generally has one quarterback and that's about it. There's normally enough to go around, or at least to some extent. So it's tough to trade for quarterbacks or trade away quarterbacks in fantasy. But Baker Mayfield is the one I want to highlight here. He's currently the quarterback 3 on the season, and he's played fantastic. I don't want to knock him at all, but he's just by no means a guy that's going to be able to keep up that level of production. The schedule here gets absolutely brutal coming up. They get Atlanta, New Orleans, Baltimore, Atlanta, and Kansas City over the next 5 weeks. All 5 of those matchups were bottom 5 matchups for opposing quarterbacks in the last year. A little bit different this season so far, but obviously Kansas City and Baltimore have still been really tough matchups. New Orleans as well. Atlanta, a little bit too early to tell, but they've also been pretty shut down against opposing passers as well. So not a great matchup there. And then San Francisco the week after that, again, a really tough matchup. So again, it's just going to be really tough for Baker to put up really big performances week after week against those teams. He's obviously a really great streaming option. I think he's a guy that should be on rosters and should be, a quality guy that you pick and choose matchups with. But, looking at his matchups, how many of these matchups are you going to feel excited about starting Baker Mayfield in? I don't think there's very many. So if you can trade him for like a week, like for a weekly starter, I think it makes a lot of sense to do it. If you could package him in a low tier player, even like an RB2 or something, or a wide receiver 2 for Jalen Hurts, I'd absolutely consider doing that. I think that there's a lot of ways you can potentially package Baker to somebody who's frustrated with their quarterback position and get pretty good value out of him for a guy that, even though he's looked great so far, it's just not a guy that I expect to be a season long difference maker for your roster. Moving on to the running back position here, this is one of the more obvious sell highs for me this season, and it's going to be DeAndre Swift. Coming off of a really fantastic game last week against the Los Angeles Rams, I don't want to take that away from him. We've seen him be really good in spurts so far over the course of his career, which it's always fun to see him do that, but in general, he's just not one of the most. His vision's really lacking. It's really tough for him to be a consistent, reliable running back because he's really dependent on what his offensive line can do for him. And in a game against the Los Angeles Rams, who have one of the worst defensive lines in the NFL, one of the worst defenses in the NFL in general, it makes sense that DeAndre Swift was able to perform at a high level. A lot of easy, big holes for him to run through, and he's an explosive athlete, a guy that can catch the ball, and it really set up really great for him to have a really great game this week. But there's still a lot of red flags there. We saw Roschon Johnson get the goal line work and score a short yardage touchdown. That getting taken away from DeAndre Swift is obviously a huge concern. It just really limits upside for running backs when they're not getting either the receiving work or the goal line work. Great to see him still be super involved as a pass catcher here, but it was the first week we saw him be as involved as he was. You could also really easily sell people on the fact that he gets to play Carolina in week 5, so he's probably going to have a really good week 5 as well. If you want to wait one more week, I think that's totally fine. But after that, the schedule is going to toughen up. They're sort of shifting towards potentially using other backs in this backfield. And when they play good defenses, he just has not been good at all this season. I think there's a lot of reasons to expect this last week to probably end up being his best game of the season. And it just makes it a really good time to sell high. You got people dealing with bye weeks for the first time. We're missing out on Saquon, Tony Pollard, J.K. Dobbins, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. Those are 5 weekly starters for people that are unavailable. People are going to need running back help this week, and trading Swift in a week right after he's coming off what's probably going to be his best game of the year, I think it makes a lot of sense to at least see what you can get for him right now. Moving on to the wide receiver position, I'm going to start things off here with Stefon Diggs, and he's actually been really good this season. Looks talented. He looks like the old Stefon Diggs, really. He looks really good. Had a really fun trick play that sort of broke down. He had to run it in for a touchdown this last week, so he's looked really good. I don't want to take anything away from Stefon Diggs there, but there's just some reasons to expect regression to the mean a little bit for him going forward. Tank Dell, he's going to get more involved over the course of the next few weeks, obviously, but dealing with an injury last week, didn't play. Joe Mixon also didn't play the last couple of weeks. The Texans probably had to throw the ball a little bit more than they want to in a normal game environment, so there are reasons to just expect the general passing and target volume for Stefon Diggs to come down. I don't want to forget either that Stephon Diggs effectively fell apart in the back half of last season. He is an older wide receiver, and that's always a risk for these older guys. We saw Adam Thielen fall apart in the back half of last season, and then come back this season and sort of start hot again. So, we're seeing that with Stephon Diggs. It's just like these older guys, it's easy for them to get back into shape, get ready to roll, be healthy early on in the season, and over the course of these just long NFL season, it's tough for these guys to stay healthy and stay fully physically capable of performing at a high level. So I think it's fair to say that Diggs is probably going to fall off just from a production standpoint over the back half of the season. The schedule also toughens up a little bit here. They get Buffalo next week. Really tough matchup for opposing wide receivers, and then New England. Not necessarily a problem, but it'll just be a game they win really easy. We're not going to see high passing volume in that game. So, he's the wide receiver 9 of the season. There's just no way he keeps that up for me. I view him more as like a low-end wide receiver 2. If you can get wide receiver 1 value for him, because he is a wide receiver 1 so far. He's got name value that would make people believe he could do it. I would definitely look to trade him just because I don't think he can keep this up the rest of the way. Next up, we got one more receiver to talk about here. It's going to be Jameson Williams, who did absolutely salvage his day this last week with a massive touchdown, had a 70-yard touchdown in this game, and that was about it. He ended up with 2 receptions for 80 yards in this game. He has 5 combined targets over the last 2 weeks after having 20 targets in the first 2 weeks. So his usage is absolutely going down. We've seen that shift to not even necessarily a more run-heavy approach, but just a lot more involvement from Amon-Ra St. Brown. This running game is absolutely fantastic as well. They're going to involve both of these running backs. And Sam Laporta hasn't even really gotten going either in this offense. So it's just there's a ton of mouths to feed in this offense. It's going to be really tough to see Jameson Williams get that kind of volume on a weekly basis. He's always a big play threat, and it's kind of easy to compare him to a guy like Rashid Shaheed, but unlike Rashid Shaheed, the usage is dropping. I know Shaheed had the goose egg in week 3, but he still had 5 targets in week 3 compared to Jameson Williams only having 3. Shaheed ended up with 9 targets in week 4. Jameson Williams only had 2. So it's just tough. Like, this is a guy that you need that big play to connect on. It makes him just a really risky flex play, sort of like what we saw Gabe Davis be for years. Shaheed was like last year. I think Shaheed's a better option than Jameson Williams the rest of the season. Williams is going to be a boomer bust flex play that you can play every single week, but with how hot he started this season, coming off of a big game here, I think you can still trade him for like a reliable starter, a guy that might be like a wide receiver 2 or 3 for you, and I don't think Jameson Williams is going to be someone that you're going to be confident in starting every single week, so I'd at least kick the tires on seeing what you can get for him, because I think he probably peaked in value after week 2 this year. And moving on to tight end here, it's really tough to talk about selling high on any tight ends because there's effectively no tight ends doing anything. And I'm going to talk about Kyle Pitts here. It's just that I don't really know what you can get for him at this point, but he's effectively useless. He had 0 points in week 4. It just doesn't seem to be very involved in the offense. We're seeing Darnell Mooney and Drake London clearly running ahead of him. Ray McLeod has more targets in the season, as does Bijan Robinson, obviously. People are really desperate for tight end production right now, and they might be able to fall prey to some name value here. Like, if people are streaming guys like Taysom Hill every single week, or they're looking at Zach Ertz, and you offer them Kyle Pitts, it's going to be a name that's going to at least jump out to them. They'll think they're maybe finding themselves an opportunity to fix their tight end room, and I just don't see it. We're looking at this is like a 3rd year in a row that we've been waiting for Kyle Pitts to be fantasy relevant. It's just not happening here. I would absolutely offload him for effectively anybody with a pulse. If we're looking at the tight end position, if you could trade him for Jake Ferguson, that'd be fantastic. Maybe you have to pair a second player to do that, but like I think people sort of view those players similarly, even though Jake Ferguson is just miles better than him. Pat Freiermuth, Tucker Kraft, Zach Ertz, all of them are better options going forward than Kyle Pitts, and those guys are on waivers. So there's just better options on waivers. I don't want to be playing Kyle Pitts going forward. Kind of could say the same thing that I just said for all of this about Mark Andrews as well. Big name tight ends that I just don't believe in the rest of the way. So if you can trade them and get value for them, I think it makes sense to, just because I don't think the bounce back is happening. It's just not going to work out for these guys this year. So again, it's tough to sell high on tight end. You're not really selling high on Kyle Pitts here because obviously he's coming off of a goose egg, but I think you can maybe extract some value out of that name, and I just don't think he's going to produce for you very much this season, so I would look to move off him if you can. So that'll do it for the sell high ticket candidates this week. Up next, I'll be going over starts and sits. So I will go over every single game in week 5, go over which players I think are fantasy relevant, and just help you guys sort of understand what I'm expecting from each of those guys and whether or not they should be in your fantasy lineups. So stay tuned for those videos. That'll be generally split into 2 videos just because otherwise it ends up being like a 40-minute video. It's easier to split it up for you guys. So stay tuned for those. Just make sure you subscribe to the channel. You'll also make sure you get access to the live stream Sunday morning, 1 hour before kickoff. I'll answer your start sit questions, go over injury updates and all that, get you guys ready to roll for week 5. Other than that, if you made it this far in the video, please do give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out quite a bit. And other than that, really fun making this video. Hopefully you guys can get some trades done this week. We got a lot of fun football ahead of us in week 5 and a lot more ahead of us the rest of the way. So stick with me the rest of the year. Hopefully we can get some championships together, and I'll catch you at the next one. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.